The purpose of this video is to prepare you for Lab 2. The Lab 2 is titled NMD90 termination or cable termination. All right, you will need to bring your tools. And the tools that you need to bring are slotted screwdriver, 1/4 inch. You will need Robertson number 1 screwdriver. This is also known as green Robertson. You will need red Robertson, which is Robertson number 2 screwdriver. You will need needle nose pliers, cable strippers, and side cutters. You will be provided with a length of NMD90 cable. NMD90 stands for non-metallic dry. 90, the 90 stands for 90 degrees Celsius, which means that this cable is supposed to withstand the temperature of 90 degrees Celsius. And you will also be provided, with a utility box, a 1/2 inch 2-screw connector with the lock nut, and a duplex receptacle. Okay, let's get started. The first thing that we need to do is we need to learn how to strip the NMD90 wire. So here's a length of it that we have. I'm just going to straighten this out. I need some more light. Let's just get some more light. Okay, there are various ways of stripping the wire. I'm going to show you one of them. I don't want you to use a knife, especially in a school. Now, later on, as you go along, you might develop your own ways of stripping the cable, and you might want to use an X-Acto knife. However, at school right now, we don't want you to use the knife. So, the way to strip the NMD90 cable basically looks like this. Yeah, here it is. All right, NMD90 cable, 14-2. What does it mean that it's 14-2? That means it has 2 current carrying conductors, and the gauge of those conductors is 14, gauge 14, American wiring gauge. Okay, so first, I'm just going to nick the wire, nick the cable, right? And sometimes I would use the strippers, sometimes I would use the side cutters, but I find the strippers work the best when it comes to this kind of stuff. I'm just going to get the focus a little bit. All right, so I'm just going to nick the wire here, just like that, right? Just so I can get the insulation off. All right, and I'm just, well, let's nick it a little bit more. Break the insulation, strip it, okay? That goes out. Now, what you're going to end up with is you're going to end up with the length of a stripped cable. Now, here, I want you to know that this part, because of what we did, is going to be damaged. So we are not going to use the cable past this point. All right, can we see that? The wires are damaged here. Can you see it? So we can't use that past this point. Make sure that part of the wire is not going to be used. Right? Now, I'm just going to also nick the insulation again. Here. And I'm going to use my side cutters. I'm just going to make a nick here, just like that. Right? Just so we can start. Just so we can start the stripping process here. Can we see that? Right here, I just made a nick. Right? This way, I'm going to be able to pull this ground wire and use it as a pull string or a ripcord. Right, so let's strip the wire, and sometimes you can use your hands and pull the wire, or you might want to use needle nose pliers or some sort of pliers. Just hold it here and pull it. Make sure you don't pull this thing towards your stomach because you can hit yourself in the stomach. So just pull it that way. Now, we have stripped a lot of wire. Now, in the beginning, I want you to strip a little bit more so you just get comfortable with the length. See how much we stripped? It's about this much. Okay, now, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel the insulation or the jacketing and cut it off. I'm going to cut it off using my needle nose. No, sorry, the side cutters. Always make nice cuts. And of course, just in case, I am going to cut off the damaged part. I'm just going to cut this off. All right, so now we have a length of wire that looks just like that. Okay. All right. Now we keep going. Okay. We need some light here. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is cut the wire off. Now, when it comes to installing the wire in the box, you don't want the wire to be less than 6 inches length of the wire. So 6 to 8 inches, something like that. Okay, you might want to cut this off. But one thing I'm going to tell you, cut the current carrying conductors and leave the ground wire not cut. Just leave it intact, okay? All right. So I'm just going to do the cut right now. All right, cut things off. Here it is. Make sure you do not cut the ground wire yet or the bonding wire yet. So you're going to end up about 6 to 8 inches of the current carrying conductors, which is the white neutral and the black hot, and you're going to have the longer ground wire. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to strip the wires. Now here is the stripper. I'm just getting tangled here with the microphone cable. This is the wire stripper. It has some grooves. Those grooves correspond to the gauge numbers. See that? Let me just give you some contrast here. When you close the stripper, those grooves are going to be the size of the gauge of the wire. Now we have 14 gauge, and what is the wire type of cable of wire that we have, or conductor, is we have a solid wire, which means it's not stranded. A solid wire is just one chunk of metal without any strands. It's a solid piece. So we're going to use a solid wire, and we're going to strip a length of the wire, well, about 1 inch or so. So I'm going to find here. Now this gauge numbers correspond to the solid conductor, and this here are for the stranded. I think this is just erased here. So 14 gauge solid is this groove right here. Okay. Which means if we close the wire, close the wire strippers, See, we have about a little bit more than an inch. You can cut things off, but you cannot add things. And you're just going to close it completely, just like that. Now, the wire should not be damaged. Now let's see, because every tool has its own personality. You're going to own your own wire stripper, and you're going to see how the grooves work. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold this wire here and push it with my thumb, right? Just like that. Now this wire should be undamaged. Let's see how well of a job that we do here. Put it under microscope. Where's the wire here? It's slightly nicked. Okay. Now this is still okay because it's just touched. But the other wire, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to go the next groove, next size up. Okay. Yeah. So instead of solid, let's go 14 stranded. So this is going to be the next groove. See if this wire stripper works better. I'm going to try to make the same length of the wires that are stripped. As I said, every tool has its own personality, and I'm going to close that, close the stripper, close the jaws, grab the wire, push it with my thumb. Now let's see how the wire works. Under the microscope. Okay, this wire is untouched. So you know what I'm going to do, because since we're going to be evaluating you on the wire damages, I'm just going to cut this off and restrip the wires. Let's restrip the wires. So now we know that for this one, if I was using this, if I were to use this pair of strippers, I am going to not use the 14 solid, I'm going to use the 14 stranded, because 14 stranded is slightly bigger in diameter, because the strands are packed together, not as a one solid piece of metal or copper. They are packed together, and they're going to occupy a little bit more volume, just to accommodate for the same amount of copper that is supposed to carry the current. So 14 stranded, we're going to use the grooves on this particular stripper to strip the solid wire. Yeah, there's one, about the same length. Grab it to the groove, close it, hold the wire, and push it with your thumb. Okay. Now we should have pretty good strippage happening here. All right, wires are not damaged. All right. There's no damage to the wires. Let's get some focusing going on. One, there's the hot black, and here's the neutral white. You see, nice and clean. The insulation was ripped, but it was not cut. That means the wire has not been touched. That's what I want you to accomplish. That's why I want you to cut a little bit longer sometimes. So the wires have to be longer, because you can cut things off, but you cannot add. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to use our needle nose pliers to make a candy cane. We call it candy cane. Get some focus happening, just so I have a comfortable workspace to work with. And I'm just going to grab my needle nose, see if I can get a good angle on the camera. Focus it again, and just make a candy cane. Just like that. Do the same thing with the other wire. Okay. Now this one has, okay, sometimes you have to shape it into place. I call it sculpting. And now we have prepared the wire to be connected to the screw terminals. Now, we have left this grounding wire or bonding wire intact because we will need it a little bit longer, and I'll show you why. Now, I'm going to put this away for a sec. I'm going to prepare the box. So the wire goes on the side, and I'm going to prepare the box. We have some knockouts here. Now, let's examine the box a little bit. This is the handy box or utility box, single gang. We have pre-punctured knockouts that we can use. And we have the mounting screws for the device. That's where these are going to go in. Focus. And we have a bonding screw right there. Here is a bonding screw. That's where we're going to connect our grounding wire or bonding wire. And I'm going to use a slotted screwdriver for that one. That's where the grounding wire is. Now, there are two ways you can go into this box. You can come from any of those knockouts, but we're going to choose either this one or that one. And I'm going to show you two ways of doing this. Okay. So let's say, I'm going to knock out this knockout right here. And basically the way you do it, you just hit it slightly with the needle nose pliers. That thing opens up. Now you can grab it. I'm just trying to work out the angles for the camera here. You can grab this thing and you can just remove it. That goes out. I'm also going to remove the other knockout just for the demonstration purposes. When this thing is done, there should be no open knockouts. And there are some devices that you can just put in those plugs. So I'm going to knock out the other knockout. All right, again, you can do just like that. Slightly open it, and then grab it with needle nose pliers. Camera angles, and you can just remove it. We have both. Now, let's see, we're going to go from this side. So that's where we're going to bring our wire. I'm going to bring the wire in to the box without installing the connector first, because I want to show you a couple of options depending on whether you're coming into this from this side or if you're coming from this side into the box. Let's say we're coming in from this side here. So I'm just going to push the wire in. And after the connector is going to be installed, this wire is going to go about this much. I want to see a little bit of jacketing sticking out from the connector. If I don't see the jacketing, that means the connector is not going to hold in place the wire by the jacketing. It's going to hold the wire in place by the other wires, by the conductors. And that's not good, because you can short the conductors. You can damage the conductors that way. There's a slight chance of doing that. So I want to see slightly bit, not too much. Don't do it like that. Okay? That's too much. I just want to see it. That's all. Now, look at this. If the wire is about this far, now we need to reach the grounding screw with the grounding wire. Now, the mistakes that people do sometimes is, I'm just going to push those away, is that they're going to just go straight into the grounding screw or bonding screw. Let's just undo this thing a little bit so we have more space to work with. Okay. I don't want any tension here. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to do a bit of a zigzag run. I'm just going to push the wire aside a little bit and aside a little bit more. That's why I needed you to cut off a little bit. So this way here, and I'm going to push it right against the wall, the back wall. This way, there is no tension on the wire. And if you need to do some work on this device, then you still have some slack to work with. Now, don't put too much slack because that can start touching other terminals, and that also would be not good. Okay. And then, once you tighten the screw, you can either go that way. Sometimes I just go, usually I just sculpt the wire right in here, this way, okay? Just like that. Because I want this wire to be right in this groove, right? There are two grooves. Let me see if I can take this screw out and show you the grooves. My slotted screwdriver here. All right, I'm going to take this bonding screw out. And I'm going to show you the grooves right here. Need to work the light angles as well. Okay, so here it is. Over here you can see a bit of a cutout, like a straight line here. And here, it's a bit of a groove happening. You want the wire to go straight into that. You don't want to go that way or that way diagonally. You want the wire to just lay in there. I'm working with this. I'm just going to put just the ending of the wire here. Just like that. Yeah. Okay, this way, when the screw tightens the wire is nicely pinched in the socket right here. Okay. I'm going to put this bonding screw back in. See if the red Robertson, the red Robertson sometimes works nicely on those. I noticed that the bonding screws quite often, the size of the screw or the socket of the screw, sometimes it's funny. So that's why I wanted you to use the slotted screwdriver. So that's one way of doing things. The other way, I'm going to straighten this out. Yours is going to be much neater, I hope, because you're not going to be doing and undoing things, because I'm going to show you how to go from the other side. So I'm going to flip the box, switch the box here. And right now, when we have this wire pushed in this way, the bonding screw is very close. You see here, zoom in a little bit. The bonding screw is very close to where the wire is coming in. Do not push that in right away. Okay, do not do this. Do not mount the wire like that. You're going to create tension here. Right here, there's going to be tension. And any movement that you need to do with the wire is going to be uncomfortable and is going to try to pull the wire out of the socket. Okay. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the conductor a little bit past the screw, just like that. And then I'm going to make a connection here with the bonding terminal. Yeah. Just like that. And now, just to make sure that the wires are nicely aligned with the grooves, I might help the wires a little bit, but slightly pinching them a little bit closer together. And then we're going to tighten up the screw, the bonding screw. This ground wire is connected right to the bonding screw. Now, I'm not going to tighten the screw yet because I'm going to need to put a connector. So I'm going to pull those wires out. There. Sometimes they like to cooperate, sometimes not. Now, here is the screw, two screw connector and a lock nut. That's how it works. So I'm going to install the connector right onto the knockout. Let's go from this side right here. Okay, so I'm just going to install the connector right here. Okay, just how this is how it goes. 1/2 inch knockout. And on the other side, we're going to install a lock nut. Now, this lock nut seems to be bidirectional. It has the grooves on both sides. Some of the lock nuts have a smooth side on one side, and on the other side, it's going to have the grooves. You want to put the grooves against this metal right here. So in order to, so the lock nut can stay in place and not being undone so easily. All right, so let me see if I can do the camera angles. I'm going to install this just like that. Not tightening yet. I'm going to have to make sure that these two set screws are on this side of the box, because this box usually is mounted with its back wall to whatever surface it is. You need to be able to operate these screws. So if you install the connector that way, the screw heads are going to be on the other side. You just won't be able to work with that because that will be the mounting surface. You just have to make sure that those are installed properly. You need to be able to get at those screws with a screwdriver. Okay. And then I'm going to tighten up by hand. And once you tighten it by hand, then you can just move this on the other side. There's one of the techniques of doing it. You can move that to tighten it up a little bit more. So that is staying nice and solid. So now we have pretty much solid connection here. However, sometimes you can use those side grooves right here, these side grooves, in order to tighten things up a little bit more. Right, so you just put the slotted screwdriver that way, hold it with your hand, and you just poke it with your other hand, just to make sure that things are nicely tight. We don't want to see any loose connection here between the box and the connector. That has to be one solid piece. Right? That cannot wobble. If it wobbles, you're going to be evaluated and you're going to get the marks deducted. Okay. Now, as you tighten the set screws here, this compression clamp is going to come down and is going to hold the wire in place. That's how this connector works. There are various connectors. You can use this 4004 connector. And how this works is that you just push the wire right in there, that way. Maybe I can just, well, I can put it in there. And once, as you push the wire in, this little holding device is going to make it stay in, because it's going to give in this direction, but it's not going to give in the other direction. It's going to hold the wire in place. And the way you install this one onto the box is just like that. Right? That's installed. And once you put the wire in, that thing is going to hold it nicely in place. Oh, I just pushed it too far. I can't take it out now, all right? So I'm just going to take this out. I'm going to pinch it with my fingers and remove the connector. There you go. Now, let's put the wire in. Just going to make sure that the compression clamp is not closed. If it is, you have to undo these two screws. And I'm just going to insert the wires into the connector. Sometimes the order of doing things will be different, because sometimes you're just going to insert the wire into the box, and then you're going to cut them to length and strip them and make the candy canes and so on. Just again, I'm going to say, leave this ground wire longer. Do not cut this until the very end, just because inside the box, obviously, we're going to use a little bit more of that wire than these two. So now I'm going to insert, I'm inserting this wire right into the connector. And on the other side of the connector, I want to see a little bit of the jacketing right here. This is no good. That means I don't know where the jacketing ends, where this jacketing ends. It could be here, it could be here, it could be anywhere. That means that these conductors could be pinched by the compression clamp. So I want to see just a time, just to know that I have gone all the way through. Right, can we see it? Yes, we can. And now, working with camera is fun. I'm just going to tighten the compression clamp, making sure that the jacketing is still there. This one here uses either, Red Robertson is good for that. So I'm just going to tighten this up. Now, when you tighten the compression clamp, make sure that you have a nice solid hold of the wire, but as I always say, don't kill it. You just need to hold it in place, but you don't need to make it so strong that the wire actually can get damaged. Still not holding it properly, so I'm just going to tighten it again. A bit more. Now we have a good solid hold, and you can see that the wires are not damaged. Can we see the jacketing on the other side? Yes, we can. See that? Lighting, there we go. Now we can see the jacketing sticking out of the connector. Next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to align, go say, okay, so now we have the bonding screw far away from the connector. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to go straight into that because I'm going to present a tension here, and then there's nothing I can do with that wire once I trim it to length. So I'm just going to have a little bit of a zigzag happening. The wire is bent from the other demonstration, from the other side, and I'm going to push it in. Oh, I tightened the screw a bit too much. Push it in here, and I'm going to go the other way. You can just cut it off here. Yes, you can. Just make sure that the wire is in the groove, and if you have a single wire, make sure it goes in a way that as you tighten the screw, righty-tighty, okay? As you tighten the screw, this wire is going to be pulled in if it's just a single wire, because you can cut this off here. But we're not going to cut this off here because we're going to continue that, because we need to connect that into the bonding screw of this duplex receptacle. So we're almost done installing the bonding screw here, or the bonding wire. It's sitting in the grooves. You don't want them to cross as well. Nice and straight. I'm going to fix it up a little bit. They're sitting in the grooves, and now I can tighten it. Looks like the Red Robertson works fine with this bonding screw. Sometimes you need to use a slotted screwdriver. And then again, you need to make it tight. Can you see that? You need to make it tight. You don't want this wire to be loose. See, now the wire is still loose. So I'm going to pull this that way with my fingers, and I'm going to continue tightening the screw. Making sure I don't see anything sticking out from underneath the screw. Now, it has to be, some people see now this this bonding screw is always funny. So it seems to be slightly too small for the Red Robertson, slightly too big for the green Robertson. So quite often I'm just going to use the slotted screwdriver. Let me just position it here because I am looking at the camera. All right, and I'm going to tighten it. How tight should this be? Well, we don't want the wire to be moving about. The wire should be held nicely in place. And it has to be tight enough. It's an arbitrary type of a term. You don't want to tighten this screw so tight that you're actually pinching the wire to the point that it's getting damaged, but you don't want this thing to be too loose. After a while, you will work it out. The term I use is, how tight does it have to be? It has to be tight enough. Once you start seeing some resistance, push it a little bit further, and you're going to have a nice connection here. So see, there's no tension going on here. Sometimes I do a little bigger zigzag. But now, when I move these wires, this little slack, extra slack here, lets me have those wires comfortable. Wires need to be comfortable in any type of installation, whether it's power wires, service wires, or communication wires. The wires need to be comfortable. I don't want to see anything sticking from underneath this, excuse me, from underneath the screw. And I don't want to see those wires out of the grooves. See, they're nicely lined up in the grooves. They have their place and they're in it. So now you see the wire became shorter. So now you can go two ways. You can start installing the screw terminals with the candy canes, or you can install the bonding screw first. Which way do you want to do it? Let's do the bonding screw first. So I'm just going to cut that to length here. See, I brought it right up to here. You still have some extra slack. Right? And I'm just aligning that thing, pushing it in so it's nicely against the back wall. So this wire is not all over the place. This way I have nice slack here if I want to move things around. I'm not limiting myself with the not having enough length of the wire. So I bring them closer together here, and I can basically, well, I almost have the correct length here. Neatness is next to godliness when it comes to wire, any kind of wire termination. So I'm going to slightly trim it with my side cutters. All right. And I'm going to make another candy cane. So now I have 3 candy canes. Like, isn't that nice? All right. Now the first bonding screw. The duplex receptacle from our theory class today was, these are the silver screws. That's where the white wire will go. These are the brass screws. This is where the black wire hot is going to go. The silver screws are connected internally to the longer prong. And the brass screws are hot. They're connected internally to the shorter prong. And because we have those tabs joining these 2 screws, it doesn't matter which one you connect, this or that, because we have a connection here. And we have a connection here. That means these 2 receptacles are connected with each other. If you split the receptacle, you just cut, usually you can cut the hot one, and you can use the neutral wire as a return wire. Sometimes you might want to prefer to use a separate neutral wire for both, so then you can separate them totally. Okay? All right. So let's install the bonding screw first. Now, just make sure that the wires are not tangled around each other. Just have to make sure that things make sense inside the wiring. Things have to be nice and neat. So first thing, I'm going to install the bonding screw. Now, as you can tell, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, right? Seems like this bonding screw likes, oh, see, it doesn't like the red Robertson, and it's sliding a little bit with the green Robertson. Actually, this one here likes the green Robertson. Depending on what manufacturer sends it to you or what day this thing was manufactured. That's why quite often I just divert to using the slotted screwdriver. But it seems like in this case, we can use the green Robertson comfortably. Now, tighty, righty, tighty. So we're turning it right this way. The screw tightens, right? See? And we turn it that way. We keep turning it right. The screw tightens. We keep turning it left. The screw terminal loosens up. Do I have to explain this? Yes, I do. Now, just make sure that the direction of the candy cane matches the direction of the screw terminal tightening. If we put it this way, then as I'm tightening this screw here, this wire is going to be pulled in. So the candy cane is within the direction, same direction. The screw tightens this way, so that means the candy cane direction goes this way as well. If If you have done it the other way, which would be incorrect, it doesn't even want to go that way. If you done this thing, if you do it this way, this would be wrong, because as you tighten this, as you keep tightening this screw, this end of the wire is going to be pushed out. You're going to have a hard time maintaining a proper connection. Very important. Right? So let's install this thing the correct way. Put the candy cane in the correct way. Nicely aligned in the grooves. You see here? There are those guiding metal strips. Do not install it like that. Do not install this like that. Seriously, do not install it that way. Make sure that the wire is nicely seated in the screw terminal. Now, you see, as I turn things around, this guiding strip is limiting my movement. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to push it against that guiding strip in order to tighten the wire a little bit more. See, now it's nice and tight. Sometimes if it doesn't cooperate, you might want to use a slotted screwdriver just to hold this in place, just like that, to block it, and use that as your limiter. Make sure things are nice and straight. And here's what I'm going to do. As the final work, this has to be nicely and straight. If it's slightly this way or slightly that way, that's okay. But you don't want to have it that way, or you don't want to have it out of the bounds. So, because it tightens this way, once the screw is going to grab the wire, it's going to bring it slightly to the other side with the direction, or to the same direction as it turns. So in the beginning, I'm going to use my thumb and push it that way. I'm going to push the wire this way so the loop doesn't escape on me. This would be incorrect. This is correct because the wire is hidden by the screw head. I'm going to push this that way here and turn it slightly the opposite way. So once the screw starts grabbing it, it's going to bring it into place. Let's see how that is going to work. See, I'm putting pressure on it already. So this pressure that I'm putting on is pulling this wire that way, and I'm slightly pulling it so it's not as straight as it should be, because when the screw grabs it, it's going to bring it into place. It starts grabbing it. Now it's brought it into place. Okay, now see that? I don't want any loose ends here. When I move it, this wire should not be running freely inside the screw terminal. It should be nice and tight. And as I say always, how tight does it have to be? Tight enough. You don't want this thing to be loose, but you don't want it to turn it so you kill it. Okay. All right. Now, here is, what do we have now? Now we have the silver and we have the brass. So since we have this thing already positioned that way, I'm going to put in the candy cane of my white wire that goes with the silver. And again, you see this, if I keep moving that way, this plastic housing here, it stops the wire. So I'm going to push it a little bit so the loop closes nicely. And sometimes if you're not happy with it, you can actually use a slotted screwdriver just to help with closing the loop. Okay. Again, the direction of the loop goes with the direction of the screw. This is a borderline because I don't want this insulation to go past the housing. Let's see when we turn this thing, let's see if it's going to grab it enough. So we are happy with, so this insulation is going to be within the housing. I don't want this bare wire to go past that. And for that, we use the green Robertson. Again, the same thing. I'm going to push it this way. All right. All right. What was this thing? Push it that way and keep pressure on the wire so it's being pulled this way here. It's going to be pulled this way. All right. So while I do that, I'm going to tighten the screw. And once it gets there, you're just going to make it nice and tight. Tight enough. Okay. This is wrong. How wrong is this? It is because this copper wire goes past the housing. We don't want that. We want this insulation. We want this insulation to be within the housing here. Okay, so I'm going to undo this and fix it. That should do it. You don't want to work if the wire gets damaged too much, you might want to just restrip it. And close it and make sure that the insulation stays within the housing. Oh, that's borderline. I'll accept that because I did it. All right. Now I'm gonna flip this thing the other side. Getting my microphone wires cut in this whole thing. All right. So now we have the other one, the other black hot wire. These go, which goes to the black brass screws, and we're just going to insert that, close it, okay, and tighten the screw. All right. We don't want this insulation to go further than that. So that's one. We don't want this other end to go past the housing. And we want the whole loop to be covered by this screw. Because if it is not, then this is just whatever is not covered, if something sticks out from the screw, then that part of the wire is not making contact with the screw terminal. Again, the direction goes this way because the screw turns this way. Okay. Now, zoom out a little bit. We ended up with something like this. Now we have to dress up the wires a little bit. First thing, I'm going to make sure that the grounding wire is not going all over the place. So I'm going to push it nicely against the back wall here. And then I'm going to align the other wires, sculpt them nicely. So they go maybe this way and that way. I call it sculpting. And then everything should be nice and cut. I don't like this grounding wire just coming too close to that, so I'm going to push it against the wall here, towards the back wall, making sure that the grounding wire is not anywhere near these terminals. And this is basically the finished product. I'm just going to, in order to make things neat, I'm going to tighten the loose screws here. just so they are not sticking out. And this is, and now, see, this whole thing has to be nicely and comfortably insertable into the box. There should be no stress on the wires whatsoever. We have enough wires. We should have 6 inches, no less than 6 inches between where the wire comes in and when it hits the screw terminal. We also don't want 12 inches or 30 inches, because how are you going to pack that thing in? So now this is ready for your inspection or for your evaluation. Again, just as a review, you want the connector to be nice and tight. You don't want any loose wire. This wire can't be loose, but you don't also want to kill it, so you do it with a feel. Different connectors have different feel to it. The lock nut over here has to be nice and tight, so the connector is not wobbling here. So if I do this, and if I see the connector moving inside, points deducted. And the direction of the loop has to match the turning direction of the screw when you make the candy canes. I don't want to see any wire sticking from underneath the screw. When I move the wire, it should not be loose. It should be nice and tight. It should be nice and tight. And I don't want the insulation to go past this housing here of the device. And also I don't want the other end of the wire to go past the housing. I also want to see the other end of the wire. I want to see the other end of the wire, because if I don't see it, I don't know where it ends. Is it just here, or it goes halfway, or is it just being grabbed? And also, what I don't want to see is I don't want the insulation to be pinched by the screw. Because if the isolation is pinched by the screw, the isolation, the jacketing here of the isolation has bigger diameter than the wire. Of course it has. So what happens is that when you pinch the insulation, you're not making a proper contact with the wire. And what happens if you don't make a proper contact with the wire is that you might get some connection, but not proper, not all the way, which means some oxidization can happen. When oxidization happens, the wire becomes on contact more resistant. And when there's more resistance, there's going to be more heat. And the more heat is going to cause the wire to oxidize even more until you can actually start a fire that way. So here is the end of the lab. This is what you're going to be evaluated on. And also we don't want to see any damage of the wires here. We don't want to see any damaged insulation. And this is how you're going to, oh, again, just as a reminder, you want to see some jacketing sticking out from underneath the connector here. Because if you don't, I don't know where this thing is pinched. It could be pinched by the wires. And also, do not run a straight line from here right to the bonding screw. Do a bit of a zigzag. If you come from the other end with the wire, just go past that, go past the bonding screw and come back to it. I want to see a little bit of, so I'm just going to sculpt a little bit more, just to make sure that the wires are nicely lined up. I like to see the bonding wire. I like to see the bonding wire pushed against the wall as much as possible. And I just want to make sure that this bonding wire doesn't come anywhere close to any of the terminals. Now, when this thing is done, of course, but don't, when you come to for the evaluation, do not assemble this whole thing, because we won't be able to evaluate your work. As the final product later on, these 632 screws are going to align with the mounting screws here on the box. So we use the green Robertson for that. Line the screw. Oops. And you can start mounting things. Here's the other side. I'm looking at the monitor screen instead of looking at what I'm doing here. Okay, so now this should be nicely insertable here, nicely and comfortable. You don't want the wires to be under any sort of stress. Okay. All right, let's just mount it on, mount it on. Some people use electric screwdrivers for that, and I don't blame them, but this is what we use here. Okay, now I'm going to make sure that this receptacle is aligned nice and straight. This is just a piece of plastic here. Right. And on the other side as well. At the end of the day, you want this receptacle to be nice and solid here. And then, as a final move, you can use this faceplate. See, this mounting screw goes right into this receptacle. Right. And you can mount that again. Do it with the feel. See, just do it with the feel. See, I'm not killing it. See, I'm just doing it with my 2 fingers. As long as things are nice and tight and they're not moving. Here's the final product. And you're also going to get an in-class demo, but now you know exactly what you're going to be doing. So go back to the beginning of this video if you want to know which tools exactly you need to bring. You need to bring safety glasses as well. You need to bring safety boots, which are Omega orange tag rated and green tag. And you need to bring a hard hat while you're working in the lab. Okay. So I have done it. Now you do it.